I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton. I hope everyone is doing well, as always. I apologize in advance. There is going to be some background noise in this intro that cannot be avoided. I have fans blowing in my apartment, like really huge industrial fans. I woke up this morning to my ceiling falling in, caving in. So that's really fun. The pool is right above my studio apartment, and it decided to leak in my hallway and into my apartment. So it's been a crazy day with a lot of people coming in and out, and I'm finally getting the chance to sit down and record this. I guess that's what's going on over here. It's been pure chaos. I hope everybody out there is doing, hopefully their lives are a little bit less chaotic. Before I get into the episode today, I want to answer a listener question. You can send those in at winedine@allportsopen.com. And this listener question reads, Hi, I'm wondering how to get my anxiety in check when just in the beginning stages of dating someone. Any advice you have would be appreciated. Thanks. Oh, this is hard. I think that's one of the most stressful yet exciting parts of dating. Maybe I'm a little bit of a masochist, but I don't know. It's kind of that fun part where you're not sure what's going on. I think the most important thing to keep in mind first is that if you haven't put a label on anything quite yet, then they're free to do what they're going to do. And that's okay. You're free to do what you're going to do too. Try to find distractions for yourself. Go exercise, go for a walk. I recently have been considering starting up running for some God-forsaken reason. That's been something that I've been considering doing. Just anything that can get your mind off of that anxiety. Read a book, do some mindfulness meditations. Dating in the early stages can be really stressful, especially when it's that weird stage, when it's been like a couple months you've been seeing somebody and you're not sure where it's going. So I totally get that. The only thing that you can control is yourself. And so that's my advice. Control what you do. As much as you may want to get clarification or reassurance from the person or people that you're dating, I would urge you to reel that in earlier on. I just think that it cannot be a good look. And I think you should be honest. You should always be honest about your needs and your wants when you're dating. If you want to have kids someday, you should tell the person that up front so that you can split ways sooner if it doesn't work out and they don't. But I think that when it comes to, these small things, like you're not sure if they're calling enough or you're not sure, texting. Some people call. Calling early on makes me really anxious. So I avoid it. But maybe if, you're talking to somebody and you do have that rapport where you call and you're feeling like it's not enough, or you start noticing patterns. Like I was talking to somebody who, said they noticed that the person that they were seeing dropped off at certain points of the week. If you start noticing those things, you can take note of them, but I would hesitate to act on them until some time has passed and you feel like you know more where you stand. Because when you're in a state of anxiety, and I'm speaking as someone who is a very anxious person, when you're in a state of anxiety, you're not fully in control of everything. You're kind of in panic mode. So I think that's overall my advice. Distract yourself, hold off on being reactive, and keep in mind that the only thing that you can control is you at the end of the day. It's a really hard lesson, one that is difficult to wrap our minds around, but it's important nonetheless. So Yeah, I think that's it for that. Again, if you have any other questions, you can write in at winedine@allportsopen.com. And I'm really excited to introduce today's episode. Today, I talked to the interview you're going to hear that I recorded quite some time ago. Was recorded with Kara from the podcast Conquest of Bliss. It's a podcast about happiness and what we do to try to find it in our day-to-day lives. So we have a great conversation. She is super fun, super cool, and yeah, would love to have her back on again at another time. Just fun to hear people's stories, to get a sense of who they are, where they come from, and what their take on life is. And I think that's been one of my favorite parts of doing these interviews. And I've missed doing interviews, so I'm really excited to jump back into that, later in 2021 as the year comes to a close. Right now, I'm still focusing on some other goals that need my attention more right now. And I have so many episodes in my backlog, so there's no need to record just yet. But I'm really looking forward to getting back to it because I love connecting to different types of people. And I'm excited for you to hear those conversations with those people. Okay, well, I think that's it. We did a listener question. I introed the episode, and it sounds like the maintenance is rolling in with a huge vacuum cleaner of some kind in the hallway. So I'm going to sign off. Going to cut to a commercial break, and then please enjoy my conversation with Kara.
Calling all citizens of Halcyon City. The newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, an actual play podcast in the game world of Masks, a new generation. Join our heroes as they struggle to build a team and save the city. Can Titan escape the shadow of his mentor burnout? Is Soul's overwhelming power too dangerous to control? Will Muse discover her past? And how does White Knight stomach all those strange snacks? Listen to Delinquent Comics to find out at allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. New issues become available to all citizens every other Monday.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am here today with my storyteller guest, Kara. How are you doing?
I'm pretty fantastic. How are you today, Rachel?
I'm good. Yeah, you're in Canada, right?
Yeah, Vancouver Island. So it's
okay.
Off the west coast of British Columbia.
Yeah. I'm from Michigan originally, and so all of my friends tease me and tell me that I'm basically Canadian. So, I live in the city now, and they're always like, you have also the friendliness of a Midwesterner / Canadian. You're too. I was a little too soft for the city at first. So
well, I think that that's a good thing.
I think so too. But it has gotten me into trouble.
I guess so. Yeah. I just would always rather be known as someone who's kind and friendly than someone who's not.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It was definitely an adjustment, moving from, the Midwest to the East Coast and, feeling out you can't just talk to random strangers on the street because they could drag you away and kill you.
Yeah.
So you never know. So let's kind of start off with you telling me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and just kind of your life story. Let's just start there.
Oh, man. I never really know what's interesting about my life story, but my name is Kara, like you said, and I'm 31, and I'm a podcaster and artist. And I mean, it didn't start that way. When I was young, I was really into drugs, addiction history. And I guess, some might say that I am into drugs now, but not how you think.
Sure.
I'm just anti-prohibitionist and very vocal about it because I think that's where addiction comes from. Sorry, I got sidetracked. I just never know how to
no.
discuss that.
Fantastic.
And in the context of the show, I have a very rich sexual history. I spent a lot of my time not knowing myself and then finding myself, and just a lot of it translated into what a lot of people would call hypersexuality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, tell me more about that. Like, when did you, I mean, we could even get into like, when did you lose your virginity? What was that like? And, yeah, like
Okay, yeah.
what's the interesting stuff? Yeah.
So when I was actually, I'm one of the few people that I know who losing my virginity was not a bad experience. It's one of the better
Oh, nice.
experiences in my youth. I lost my virginity when I was 14 to at the time he was my boyfriend, and we had a sleepover. So I was raised really like strictly religious. So I was not allowed to have boyfriends, but I did. And our friend, okay, so he was the my dad's best friend's son's best friend. So not
Oh, wow.
quite a
Okay.
family friend, but
Sure.
and so we had a sleepover and we were in this tent and he played Sex and Candy for me on his guitar. And yeah, and then we had sex and it, I mean, I wouldn't say that it was good sex, but it wasn't like a traumatizing, awful
Sure.
experience either. It wasn't bad. I mean, of course I had no reference, but it didn't seem bad. Like I wasn't upset after or anything. And I know a
Hmm.
lot of people like hated that experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I love hearing stories of people who actually, had a good experience. Because, like you said, it seems like the majority of people that I talk to, it was at best lackluster and at worst traumatizing. So,
Yes, that's what I hear a lot too, is that it was like traumatizing. And like, I mean, I would probably consider it lackluster in the sense that it was only, a very brief, confusing thing. And I wouldn't say that
sure.
I got pleasure, but I was so happy, right? It was very, very tender and romantic.
Yeah, which is, I mean, all that you can expect for your first time, especially if it was his first time too. Like, yeah, it wasn't going to be fantastic.
Yeah. And we were just kids, right? Like I was
Yeah,
14. So I was a
no,
kid.
absolutely. Well, you said that you were raised in a religious background. How do you think that that kind of shaped, your upbringing and like your views around sex, sexuality, and
Oh,
all of that
very,
good stuff?
very complicatedly. So like growing up, interestingly, okay. Oh, whew, so many thoughts. I hate that. Um, so growing up, sex was bad. Premarital sex was worse. Um, just sort of that whole narrative. It's very familiar for people, so I won't dig too far into it. But the way that it impacted me was to fear it, and I was also taught pretty. I want to say inadvertently, but I don't really think that that's accurate. Pretty advertently, I don't think that's
Hmm.
a word. That my main function as a woman would be to serve a man, especially sexually. I remember as
Mm-hmm.
a young girl, my like I was like a young teenager. My dad would say that no guys wants to be friends with me. They only want me for sex, and that I shouldn't try to be friends with guys. And so like that kind of weird combination. And I mean, in his head, he was like, we've talked about it since and whatever. But in his head, he was trying to protect me
Right,
from being taken advantage of. But how that
right.
translated to me was, oh, if I want to have males in my life, I have to have sex with them.
Mm, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, you said that you've talked to your dad about it since. Are they still like, first off, I guess, like what kind of religion, just if you don't mind me asking? And then
Oh,
secondly, like, are they still kind of involved in that? Have they loosened up a little bit?
great question. So, I've talked to my dad about it, and now his narrative about that particular piece is that he only meant that as a 14-year-old because that's what 14-year-old boys meant, which was also not true, but whatever.
Right.
As far as what religion it was, we were Christian.
Okay.
Pretty, I mean, they didn't call themselves evangelical, but very close to evangelical Christianity.
Yes. My partner
And
grew up in that area as well.
yeah, rough. At least for me, it was rough.
Yeah,
But
I think it's rough for many people.
but the result now is that my mom is married to a man who is Christian or identifies as Christian. I don't
Okay.
know a ton about his or her beliefs. My mom's a very chill person. Um and she's dealing with my this is a little bit of a side note, but she's dealing with my nana who has dementia right now, and
Hmm.
the the horny woman thing definitely runs in the family, right? Because dementia really brings out characteristics that, people try to sort of hide or whatever.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And so like my Nana's, she's just so funny. She's like a crush on my partner now. And she's so funny. And then as far as my dad goes, I don't think my dad considers himself to be religious at all. Maybe the religion of him. I don't know.
Sure.
But they both moved away from the church when I was, I don't know, 15, 16, somewhere around there. And then when I went to rehab for drug addiction is when, of course, they started smoking weed. And my mom since quit, but my dad smokes weed all day long, every day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Love that openness. Yeah. That's that sounds really difficult. I know. I think that my partner actually got similar messaging from his parents about friendship. Like he tried to have female friends, and he would hug his female friends, and one of them happened to, have big tits, and he wasn't even thinking about the fact that she was gifted by God, I suppose, but. He got into the car and his dad said to him, if you get too close to the fire, you're going to get burned. And my partner was like, what does that even mean? Like, I'm hugging my friend. And it's like, why? Like, Dad, why were you thinking about her tits?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It just kind of goes to show when your parents are like so focused. It feels like the focus on sexuality can actually be more detrimental. And it's like if your dad hadn't said that, then who knows if you would have had better friendships with guys at a younger age.
And that's the interesting thing to me is because like now that I'm older and I really started to examine those beliefs and when I looked back, like I absolutely had male friends that just wanted to be my friend. In fact, I had one friend, we'll call him Mike. He only wanted to be my friend and I had this huge crush on him. And we ended up having sex one time, mostly because of peer pressure from people around us because they decided we needed to have sex. And it was super fucking awkward. Or sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss.
Of course you're allowed to cuss.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
It was super fucking awkward and it was terrible. It was for both of us just terrible sex. And it's funny now when we look back at it. But at the time it was just like so much worse than if we just had our friendship like we'd intended to.
Yeah. Wow. That's I feel like I have stories like that too. Just looking back at friendships that I had with guys and being like, why did I assume that it had to get weird? I don't know. But I think I also had the opposite experience where I really just wanted to be friends. And I still have this experience where I just want to be friends. And it just feels like every step of the way I'm unable to be because of. So what do you think of this idea? This is kind of a psychological exercise, a thought exercise, I suppose.
Ooh, okay, I'm into it.
I have spoken with my partner about male and female friendships. I have male friends. He has female friends. And I think that having just friendships, very platonic with the opposite sex is really good. And I think that, quite frankly, it's made him a better partner to have these female friendships. But I've heard this idea. And I don't know. I think I find some truth to it that when it comes to it, women are the gatekeepers of sex. And so women are the ones who decide if it's a friendship or if it's going to become something more. But I don't like that because the assumption there is that guys are just like always, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, what do you think about that?
So I just super, super disagree with that idea. And that actually, okay. So I agree that women are the gatekeepers of sex in the sense that when two people are both interested in each other, usually it's the woman who decides when, unless there's like force involved.
Right.
But as far as like deciding if there's a potential or compatibility, I do definitely think it's both parties.
Right.
And and so like Like, and both parties have to be on board. Like, I don't think that one party on either side makes that decision. Because I've definitely, like, my partner now, he pursued me not aggressively, but like he made it known that he liked me, and he spent time with me in a very like loving and friendship way for quite a while before I realized that I loved him. And you know, him wanting it didn't just make it happen. And in the same way, I've definitely pursued friends who weren't interested, and it just never happened. So does that make
Right.
sense?
Totally. I mean, you're just you can't just I mean, it's the message of life, right? Just because you want something doesn't mean that it's for you. Yeah, I'd heard that once and I kind of like agreed with it, but then, you know, based in the context of this conversation, I was like, wait, that takes away, like, that just assumes the worst of guys. And I mean, I'm actually also 31, and don't like get me wrong, I went through a really man-hating phase.
Yes, me too.
In my 20s. I you know, and for not bad reasons. I mean, when you've been hurt a lot and betrayed a lot, like, I think it's natural that you kind of, but they're out there, right? And you find them again, and you know, make friends with men, and you have good men in your life. And
for some reason, I'm reminded of this one incident that I had, because like it's some men and it's some women. And this experience that I had where I was friends with this guy, and I had assumed that we were friends. And I remember like he was kind of hitting on me, and I sort of like rejected it a little bit or whatever. And it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. And then one time I messaged him after that and was like, hey, like, I just really need a friend right now. And he goes, what makes you think that I want to be your friend? He's like, I want to have sex with you. That's it. I have no interest in friendship.
Jeez.
And I was like, holy shit. Like, how bold and hurtful. So,
Oh my
so
gosh.
I mean, yeah, there's assholes in every gender, every race, every group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's I frequently say the say the phrase, you know, women are not machines that you put kindness coins into until sex falls out. So this idea that, you know, oh, I'll like stick around and, you know, be her friend, and then like if I'm nice enough, if I'm a good enough friend, if I'm a good enough person, like, you know, then she'll have sex with me.
Yeah.
It's this like crazy story that we were told in like the early 2000s, all of those movies that were like out at that time, where there was just this assumption that like if you were just like a good enough guy, and there's this obsession, I think, with in culture of like being a good enough guy, or, you know, the perfect type of person. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, the idea of women as a prize at the end of the journey.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned your partner. Tell me a little bit about that, like how your relationship history kind of brought you to where you are now, how you met, and kind of what that's like. And
Okay.
you can get into the sex stuff if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it involves sex, obviously, or maybe not, obviously.
Most good things do.
But okay. So we met, oh gosh, 2.5 years ago, somewhere in there. He was one of the first people I met when I moved to Vancouver Island, and we met online, on online dating, and we chatted, and then immediately started dating other people. And he so I actually met him in person the first time because he was getting me acid to try with a different person that I was with.
Oh,
and and so my mom called him acid guy for like ever. It's like, that's my friend acid guy. And we would just chat online a lot, just like about philosophy and like homesteading and farming and just, you know, like the whole like dreams thing. But it was not in the context of us being together. And I didn't at the time realize that he had feelings for me. And he was dating this other girl who turned out to be, I'm not really sure what the right word is, because like she turned out to be abusive, but I don't think that makes her an abusive person, just in the context of the relationship.
Sure.
And so he was dating her, and then they broke up, and then he messaged me and asked if he could come see me. And I was like, I need popsicle sticks. So he went and got me popsicle sticks and glue so that I could make something out of popsicle sticks and glue, because that's what I do. And because I'm weird. And then drove for like 2 hours to come bring me these popsicle sticks and glue. And I remember I wouldn't let him come to my house. So he met me at the train tracks by my old house. And it was just so funny to me. And we like found this snake, and we were like, it was like this tiny little snake that tried to eat, like tried to bite us, and it wouldn't have been able to hurt us if it did. And we like didn't want it to bite us because then we couldn't have gotten it off without hurting it. And so that was that kind of thing. And then over the summer, we started to hang out all the time. And as this is happening, so like very best friend zone, as this is happening, and I don't mean like friend zoning, I mean like that's just
Sure.
the dynamic we had. And as this is happening, I am talking to this other guy online, and I have no idea what I'm feeling. I'm feeling very confused. The guy was very similar to me, the guy that I was talking to, and I was just really confused. But he lived really far away, and the pandemic had already started. And so I just wasn't sure. But anyways, this friend of mine who I maybe had feelings for, but didn't really know, was celibate, and he was like super into like puritanical stuff at the time.
Oh,
Not from
yay.
like a religious point of view, but like I don't know how you would explain it, but like hyper spiritual. Like he did a lot of fasts and stuff. And I found that fascinating.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, I want to try that. Right. And I mean, at no point did I think that anything were to happen between this guy and I, but I found him really interesting. And so I was like, I'm going to try that. And then eventually that guy ended up, I don't know, being a dick and deciding that we weren't friends anymore, but didn't say anything. And, you know, the whole story, that's always fun.
Ghosted as a friend.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, so fun. But I remember, so I was like, okay, I'm going to be celibate. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to go celibate, I want to have some sex first.
Yeah.
And at the time, like I, 30 years old, very free spirited and single. So for the most part, I would just, I had like a handful of guys that I would have safe sex with when they were available and when I wanted to. But I didn't want to fuck with them. Honestly, I was just like, that's not what I want to do. I was like, I'm going to ask my current partner. So I was like, hey, okay, I'm going to call him. I need a name for him. Can you pick a random dude's name?
Just call him like Joe.
Okay. So I call Joe and I'm like, or I text Joe and I'm like, hey, I want to be celibate. Will you have sex with me? And he's like, yes, of course. And so he picks me up, and he at the time lived like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I was living. And so he comes over and, or he picks me up, sorry, or I don't remember how I got there, but I was at his place, and we have sex, and I start crying, and it's funny to me. So we're having sex, and he happens to do this position that one of my exes used to only ever want to do that position. He was like, this is the only position I want to do. He was super controlling. He was another person who was abusive, but I don't think meant to be. So my ex used to only do this position. And so when we moved into this position, I just felt like a piece of garbage and just started fucking crying while we're having sex. And he's like, what the hell? He's like, are you okay? God. And so we like go sit on his deck and talk for, whatever, an hour, like talk through me crying and all this stuff. And then we went and had sex again, and it was fine. And he's like, can I cuddle you? And I remember I couldn't sleep. I was so confused. And it was also kind of painful because like he's quite well endowed.
Okay.
Like incredibly like it's like, I think we looked and it's like 99th percentile, like ridiculous.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Is it painful? Does it hurt?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Is it like, I mean, is it, and you can tell me if it's too much, but like, is it like girthy, or is it the length, or is it both?
It's both. So I think it's like 8.5 by 6 or something.
What?
Like, yeah, it's ridiculous. And like it's both. And so, and I was like not expecting that, because like Joe is an incredibly like meek, mild, cool dude. right? So you just don't expect it because he's not cocky, you know. He's like,
well, he is, but
he never mentioned it in, you know, the entire time we were friends, like never even like alluded to it, right?
oh my gosh.
So I was super surprised, and it wasn't the best sex because it hurt, and I
Yeah.
cried and everything, and I was like, ah. And then so we just like go on, and I decide to be celibate, and I'm celibate for like 3 weeks, and then my fucking cat dies, right?
Oh no.
And yeah, super devastating. I was so sad. So I called Joe. It's so weird to call him Joe. So I called Joe, and he drives me to the vet to take care of everything because I couldn't drive because I was crying so much, and I hate driving. And so he drives me to the vet, and I'm like, okay, let's have more sex.
Isn't that so weird that like when you like are feeling grief, I'm the same way where like when I'm feeling grief, I want to feel comforted, and like how close can we be? Oh, the closest that we can be is you literally inside of me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so we start having sex all the time. But at this time, like, I'm a fucking bitch, right? And I shouldn't say I'm a bitch, but I was very, very like hardline boundaries. So I was like, we're not going to date no matter what happens, even if I get accidentally pregnant. And because I'm not interested in having an abortion because I want children. So like, even if we get accidentally pregnant, I'm still not going to be your girlfriend. And, and he's so cool. Like, he's the best guy in the whole world. He's like, okay, you know, and I'm like, who made you? You don't seem realistic, but whatever.
wow.
And so we're sleeping together, and all of, and then my friend who I was talking about before, so that's when he ghosted, and it triggered this sort of frustration and this confusion, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, you know, just in general, like, what is it that I want? Where do I want to go with life? So I call Joe, and he drives out from work. He like worked a super long day, exhausted, drives over, and he's like, I don't know why, but I knew that you needed me here today. And so we're having sex, as we do. and I'm like, so hypothetically, if I wanted to be your girlfriend, would you want that? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, that's just a hypothetical, but you know, you'd have to ask me. And he's like, oh, okay. And so, of course, as one does with their friends that they're not dating, we got a hotel with a big bathtub and had a Pretty Woman night. And I say Pretty Woman night because of how they have the shared bath in Pretty Woman.
Yes.
So we drank a bottle of tequila and had Pretty Woman night and had the most incredible sex. Not to be like TMI, but I think he counted, and I
love TMI.
came, I think like 23 times.
Oh wow! How long was the session?
Well, it was multiple sessions,
sure.
3 or 4 sessions, probably a couple of hours each. But he's really, really well endowed, and he's also a very good listener, and a, you know, sort of lover. And at the same time, I've spent a lot of time getting to know my body. So I know that number seems unrealistic to people.
No, I am a similar way. I think that when you like really know how your body works, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So we like he counted because he is so proud of himself, right? And then the next day he was like, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I was like, yeah. And then we moved in together within a month. And like, we're idiots. Well, okay, we're not idiots, but this could have gone really poorly for us because we both put in our notice where we lived without a place to move to.
Oh, wow.
In a market that is not designed for that.
Yeah. How long ago was this? Like, how long have you guys been together?
End of October. Okay. So we...
Yeah, middle of a pandemic.
Middle of a pandemic, and like the housing market is just insane right now. But we had faith and a little bit of stupidity, and we made it work. So we ended up moving into this tiny little bachelor suite at first in the same place that we're living now. But the bachelor suite had no bathroom door. The plumbing malfunctioned at one point and was pushing poop. We don't even know if it was our poop or other people's poop up through the bathtub.
Oh my gosh.
So we coped with that by saying, I feel so close to you right now, like a poop tub. And it helped. And so no bathroom door, poop tub, no closet. And he's going to school to become a Red Seal carpenter.
Ooh, okay.
From home because it's a pandemic.
Right.
And I'm trying to do my podcast and I'm trying to do my work. And we have enough stuff for 2 people in a room that's like 300 square feet, maybe 200 square feet. And so very shortly afterward, we were able to move into where we are now, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So I actually have a whole office now.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, it's an office / music room. So he's got his 7 guitars or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's kind of the story of Joe and I.
That's so funny. I love those stories that just kind of, I don't know, like right place, right time, meeting a person and the stars align, like, you know, and here's the thing. If you had not had those boundaries, you might have gotten into a relationship before you felt ready. And who knows if it would have worked so well, you know? So I think those boundaries and just knowing what you wanted at that time.
Well, and I super agree
awesome.
because I think that I really would have taken him for granted if I didn't realize how much he was right for me.
Mm-hmm,
and I think that he would have felt that and disliked me very hard.
Yeah, no, and I do have to ask too. This is the first time I'm asking on the podcast. Maybe not. I don't know. But what are your zodiac signs?
Oh, okay. So he's a Cancer.
Okay.
And I am a Scorpio Libra cusp. So
okay.
the
I'm a cusp
24th
too.
of October. So I'm like, fiery Scorpio with the balance. And he's a water sign too.
Yeah, so you have the Scorpio and the Cancer and then the air. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, he must be very, I mean, it already sounds like he's just kind of a good listener and sensitive, so.
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous. He treats me a way that, like, I remember before we started dating, he said, if there's one thing that I could accomplish during our friendship, it's that I would like you to see yourself the way that I see you.
Oh,
and
I love that.
I know, right? And at the time I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. It's so funny how romantic he was and my brain just fucking missed it.
See it.
I was just like, oh, we're best friends. Let's go bungee jumping, and he has his moments. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a human. But overall, like, he's just so kind. And most importantly, he's committed to being in the relationship because he wants to. And I think that makes such a huge difference. Like, I know so many people who are in relationships and they're fighting each other. Like it seems like they view it as a competition. So it's like, well, you said this and you said this, and it's like, okay, but like, why are we keeping score?
No, absolutely. And I always, say, my partner and I always say that it's really important to remember that we're on the same team. It's us versus the problem. It's us versus the conflict, not us versus each other.
Yes.
And I think we've been together for almost 4 years now. And like you do start, to take each other for granted or to like kind of miss those things. And then you kind of have to like take a step back and be like, okay, like something's not gelling. Is this like, I mean, recently it was like a me problem. I was having a career meltdown. And the thing is, if one person's being affected, like the relationship's going to be affected. And you need to like take a step back and be like, okay, like this isn't us versus each other. This is us versus a problem. And what can we focus on that this person is supporting me in so that, and also just this reminder that like your partner can't be your entire world. Like these are all things that I feel like you're really good at and you're really mindful about in the beginning of a relationship. But then as you like get into the groove of things, like, you kind of forget those things. But I always say like remembering that you're on the same team is so, so important, and something that I think is easily forgotten with time, but like, no, it's so important to be a constant reminder. I feel like I need to like put it on my fridge.
Well, and I mean, that's like, I resonate with a lot of what you said, and we've only been together, I don't know, since September, like officially. And we've already had lots of moments where we forget, either that we need to be on the same team. Like a really good example is I also had a career meltdown just yesterday. And, and he says to me, he goes, well, I can help. And I'm like, no, no, you can't. I was like, then you'll be all sad and stuff. And he's like, no, seriously. He's like, it matters to me. He said, I would rather help you and take some of my energy than A, have you upset, or B, have you quit what you love. And I was like, oh, like, he's so much more mature than me a lot of the time. Oh my goodness.
Are you guys around the same age?
Actually, yeah, he's 31 as well. He'll be turning 32 on Canada Day.
Canada Day. Yay.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
That's 3 days before the 4th of July.
Yes. I don't know why I knew that. But I did know that for some reason. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And what a cool story of just vulnerability from the beginning. And, you come to find out that the person that they were just there the entire time. You just needed to see them.
Oh, I know. Right? It's just like a fucking rom-com, right?
Well, yeah. How did the podcast start? Tell me a little bit about that.
So the podcast started mostly because I had come to realize that there's not a lot of accessibility around topics of happiness, well-being. I've actually done an episode about sexual well-being and the power of the female orgasm.
Amazing. Yes.
And there's been, it was just, I was just finding that it wasn't accessible. Like, it was either high level jargon, people talking, and you'd need like a whole breadth of information before you could really understand the conversation, or it was hidden behind like paywalls. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm very pro therapy, but the fact of the matter is that not everyone has access to it.
Completely.
And so, like, coming from drug addiction and hypersexuality and the problems that can come with that, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons or for reasons that aren't healthy, whatever. And all of that stuff, like, I just had a troubled past, and I knew that there was something there. And so I spent all of my energy figuring out how to kind of get there. And then I realized that people were often coming to me and asking me for advice or questions, and I would give them these tools, or I would talk about these things. And at first I was going to write a book, but I didn't want it to be static because I'm constantly evolving. And I also didn't want it to just be me, because I am limited in my knowledge. And so I asked my Facebook what I should do, a blog, vlog, or podcast, and it was overwhelmingly podcast. And so I was like, okay. And I just grabbed my $30 mic my mom had bought me for Christmas the year before and this tablet, and just started recording and made my intro out of free music from freemusicarchive.com.
This is my story too. Yeah.
And just started. And I'm not going to lie, the beginning was kind of rough as far as like quality goes. I definitely, you can see me getting my bearings and understanding the process better and stuff like that. And next thing you knew, it was just something that I was doing all the time. It was something that really brought me life, and I'd get feedback from people, like someone stopped cutting because of something I said on the show.
Oh, I love that.
Someone decided to rekindle their relationship with their mom, and there's just all these really cool stories. And I was like, oh shit, this is actually something valuable.
Definitely. That is so cool. Yeah. So how long has it been? I think I listened to a few of your most recent ones, and I listened to some of your older ones, I think. But how long ago was it that you started it?
March 8th, 2020. And 2020. I say March 8th only because if I don't say the full date, I forget.
Good to have a memory in there. Yeah, I feel like the pandemic really was a moment of, and that was right before the pandemic really took off. But I also started this venture in 2020, in August of 2020. So It's very very, very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the concept of just normalizing conversation about sexuality.
It's been incredibly rewarding, just having different conversations with people too, such as yourself. And what I just love is this concept that everybody has a story, right? Whether they are a therapist or a coach of some kind or whatever, like they have a story to share. So I just think that's been really rewarding to just kind of be able to amplify other people's stories.
Well, and I appreciate being given the space to do that too. It's really cool because it's an area of my life that I don't want to say don't get to because I can, but it would be shoehorning it in to talk about it. Right. And especially because Joe, especially because Joe is so well endowed, then if I talk about it, it seems like it's bragging.
Sure.
Or humble bragging if I'm like, oh, it's so painful that, and so like, there's not really a space for me to talk about it in an open way. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's, and I think too, like, let's kind of talk about, the stigma of sex. You said something before we hit record that you kind of were perceived a certain way when you were younger and how, that affected you. If you kind of want to go into that.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of calling back to, my perceptions of sex when I was young and not understanding it. So I had this sort of narrative in my head that was enforced by external factors that I needed to have sex in order to be accepted by the males in my life, the men in my life. And so I would have a lot of sex. And I'm going to tell you right now, most of it was terrible sex. Like most of it was disconnected and very sort of wham, bam, thank you, ma'am type sex. And, it didn't really improve my social standing. It, in fact, kind of painted me as someone who, I got called a slut a lot, like even by my brothers. My brothers would always make jokes about how I'd sleep with all their friends because we had the same friend group. And I think that that's how they coped with it, to be fair.
Sure.
And there was this big stigma that like I felt like I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because if I had sex, then I was a slut. But if I didn't have sex, I truly believed that nobody would want to be my friend.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't know what to do. And then as I got older, the stigma stuck around. And then when I was a young adult, after I got clean and all of that, I I started having more casual relationships and learning about my body, but I still wasn't there. I remember I had my first orgasm when I was 19, or from sex when I was 19.
From penetrative sex, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose I had orgasms from getting head. So yeah, so penetrative sex. And then when it was really when I left my ex of, I don't know, a few years ago, I was dating someone, that guy I was talking about before, who was very like strict and abusive, the guy that I ended up crying. Yeah. Okay. So after I left him, I sort of unburdened myself from that stigma where I was like, you know what, I'm going to own this. Like, I don't really care. And I remember coming up with this sort of concept in my head that was really comforting to me. And that is, how they say that you like sort of give a piece of your soul to everyone that you have sex with?
Oh, do they say that?
Oh, yeah.
So some people are lucky as fuck.
Well, what I was thinking was if that's true, then it goes both ways and that I would have a swamp water soul. And I think that's kind of dope. And so I sort of started framing it differently and understanding that people are going to judge me no matter what I do. And it was so freeing to go, you know what? Like, that's super awesome. I love the idea of having little pieces of every person I've been with, because then I'm this beautiful mosaic of a human being. Right?
Right.
And I know that that's a little bit of a stretch and like kind of convoluted, but it worked for me.
No, I like it. And life is messy, right?
Yeah, it really is. So, and then it was right after this kind of phase that Joe and I got together.
Got it. Yeah, it's funny how just things kind of seem to work out as they're supposed to, when they're supposed to, and you learn what you need to learn. I mean, life is messy, but there's also some pretty like strange timing
Yeah.
things, right? And again, like, you know, on the subject of timing, like you wouldn't have been ready for, you know, this if you hadn't gone through what you had gone through. So
Well, and, in addition to that, not only would I have not been ready, but like now, when we're intimate, God, it's so good. Even if it's painful sometimes and we have to readjust, it's so much better. We're able to explore and try new things, and it's way better.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, okay, so we've talked about sex, we've talked about your relationship, you know, and we've talked about happiness. How do you think, you know, your podcast is about happiness, the conquest of bliss. How do you think that self-love, happiness, romantic relationships, and like sexual relationships with other people and yourself, like how do those all interplay together?
That is a really, really good question. And I would start with saying that there was a lot of studies that have been done about like what's the number one factor in happiness. And often that's those studies come back that most people find the most fulfilling part of their lives to be the relationships that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, relationships are critical to happiness for most people. Of course, there's different types of divergencies and stuff from that. But as far as like sexuality and interpersonal relationships go, I say that they play into sex because they allow you to see a mirror of yourself that you can't see alone.
Ooh, I like that.
When, like there are things that I've learned about my sexuality or just my being, things, traumas, all sorts of things that I only learned through sexuality and relationships with other people. As far as self-love, I mean, I would say that that's probably the heart of happiness
Yeah.
because when we don't practice self-compassion and figure out how to love ourselves, not only is it harder, not impossible, but harder to love other people, but it also makes things very fragile. When you're dealing with everything is good, but you've got an underlying sense of self-loathing, anything going wrong triggers that and then overtakes all the other stuff in your life. And so practicing tools that bring you closer to self-love, including including being kind to yourself when you're not there yet,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
make all the difference because it basically kind of creates a shield around the happiness and the things that you build. Because then if something goes wrong, you go, you know what? It's okay because I do have myself. Because unfortunately, as important as relationships are, they all end. Every
Mm-hmm.
single one.
Yep. Whether it be by, you know, a breakup or just not being compatible anymore, like as friends or death, you know,
Mhm.
they all end. You die alone at the end of the day.
Yeah, and as sad as that is, it can also be really comforting to know that you have the opportunity to have one person with you forever, and that's yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you better, you know, work to make it a good relationship because it's like what you have. And I always say to my partner, I say, you know, I have a history of throwing my entire being into my romantic relationships
Mhm.
and finally kind of broke that pattern after my last breakup. And I say to my partner, I say, look, I love you so much. I love you more than I have ever loved another person romantically. And then I say, but I love me more. And if at a certain point, you know, loving you gets in the way of loving me, I choose me.
I love that. I have goosebumps.
Yeah, like it took me a really long time to get there. And sometimes, you know, in moments of not weakness, but when I don't feel as strong in my sense of self, you know, I start to identify myself through the relationships that I have with other people, my friendships, my family, you know, my romantic
Mhm.
partner. But in my moments of like true standing and like who I really am, like I really do believe that. And I really do feel that way.
Well, and I think that one thing that a lot of people miss about that, because I agree, I take that stance, I guess, as well. But I think a lot of people miss that if you don't approach relationships, even non-romantic relationships, but if you don't approach relationships with your own well-being as a priority, then then there's a lot more potential for things to go severely awry. Because if you aren't taking care of yourself, then you can't show up for other people in the same way that you'd like to. And
Absolutely.
they feel that, and then it becomes a cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, oh yeah.
As I say.
Church phrases for the win.
Yeah, who knew that they would be so relevant? Yeah. Well, Kara, I guess tell me where people can find you, where they can find the podcast, if they can follow you online, if there's any last pieces of advice that you want to share. This is like your time to, give your message to the world and promo.
All right, cool. Okay, so you can find me at theconquestofbliss.com. It's a shared website with my Artstrom, so you'll have to click on the headphones with the heart with headphones. You can also find me anywhere podcasts are found at The Conquest of Bliss. And all of my socials, except for Twitter, are The Conquest of Bliss. My Twitter is The Conquest of B1 because I'm terrible at Twitter. And otherwise, you can just sort of find me online, probably not through my name because I'm bad at SEO, but The Conquest of Bliss, you'll find me. And as far as one last piece of advice that I would give people, it is just to remember that it's a process and that we never know. We never know if a situation is good or bad until we've gotten some space from it. Retrospect tells us a lot. And so when things feel really, really stressful, it can be comforting to remember that you don't actually know that this is bad in the grand scheme.
Mm-hmm. That is really good advice and something that I feel like I needed to hear this week. So thank you.
Glad to hear that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Everybody, check out the podcast, The Conquest of Bliss. Follow Kara where you can, Instagram, I assume Facebook, all the places that you just mentioned. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
And everybody, thank you for listening. This has been Wine, Dine, and 69. I'm your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.